following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners on Saga 960 AM and those listening around the world on streaming and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner, and I am not a therapist, but I'm your source for practical advice for everyday problems using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This episode, we're building on what we talked about last week. We talked about making changes because many people responded to that show saying they felt called out in a good way regarding making changes. I've got my first interview of 2023 on this episode. Phil Johnson, the founder of the Master of Business Leadership program right here in Mississauga, Saga 960's home base. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence and how that ties into change. Now, you'll notice a change in the time slot this week if you're listening on Saga, because we've been preempted on Thursdays for Raptors and Steelheads games, and I love my Raptors, so I'm totally cool with that. Raptors come first. Now, speaking of first, before we get into tonight's discussion, I have a question from a listener from last week. Now, if you want to ask a question the way this listener did, give me a call, 289-275-9600, 289-275-9600, or my preferred method of contact, Liana at nottherapyshow.com. My name is spelled Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Or if that's too much to remember, you can go to nottherapyshow.com, fill out the contact form there, or go to Twitter or Instagram at nottherapyshow. I do weekly videos on Instagram and TikTok if you're interested in more, say off the cuff content. Yeah. This question is from a listener that we'll call Agatha, just because I'm on a big Agatha Harkness kick from Marvel superhero stuff. And the listener asked me not to use their real name, so she's getting named after a sorceress who takes power from those who don't deserve it. It ties into the theme this week. Here's the question. Hi, Liana. I really enjoy your show and try to listen every Thursday. I've told others about it too. I appreciated the affirmations you gave towards the end of tonight's show. The three I repeat to myself are, life is tough, you be tougher. This person isn't worth getting cancer over. Instead of yes, but, stop, feel, and then say, now what? Your talk tonight was timely for me towards making changes. I'm strengthening my boundaries with others and with myself in many ways. It feels good to be making these improvements. Any suggestions on how to set boundaries to protect myself from a bully relative with whom I've had as little contact as possible for years, but unfortunately will now need to have regular ongoing financial and legal discussions for some months or years to come. I value your views and would appreciate any recommendations on an upcoming show. Thank you, Liana. A happy and healthy new year. Okay, Agatha, who's not really Agatha. Bully relatives are tough, especially regarding financial and legal decisions. I had to deal with that years ago regarding settling the estate of a relative, and oh boy, do I wish I knew then what I know now. I'm going to give you a piece of advice that sounds weird at first, but I'll explain the method to my sorcery here after I give the tip. The tip is this. The more words you use, the better it is for them, and the worse it is for you. So use as few words as possible, give them as little attention as possible, and plan your communications with them so you can leave as soon as things start falling into their power dynamic. Take power from those who don't deserve it, like Agatha Harkness, see? Family bullies don't tend to be the overt, yelly, violent kind. If they are, all the more reason to not be alone with them. But those bullies tend to be seen for what they are. So I'm assuming that this is more the manipulative, playing the victim when it suits, making people miserable kind of bully. That being said, this approach works for all types of relational bullies because bullying is about power. Combating bullying is about understanding the power structures that allow the bully to bully and not playing that game. Now, financial and legal discussions are a particular rule set. They're a particular kind of game from the outset. There are certain things in financial and legal discussions that you can't coerce, manipulate, or foot stomp into changing without breaking some law or regulation, because finances have regulations. Legal discussions have laws that people just can't change because of a toxic family dynamic. So if you have to talk to this person, use whatever structure is in place to your advantage. Usually, these structures for financial and legal decisions require all parties to agree for anything to move forward. Joint decisions have to be joint decisions. Now, I'm not saying this is 100%. This is an assumption I'm making. I am leaving open the alternative option that this person has some sort of control over you in this scenario because of the legal or financial situation. But Agatha said discussions. And this scenario wouldn't involve that. If this person just had power to do whatever they want, they'd be able to do whatever they wanted. But either way, no matter what the details of this situation are, the law is the law. Regulations are regulations. That's where you can stand in your power here. And when you stand in your power, a bully can't bully you effectively. Now they're going to try, but it won't work as well as it has in the past. Now this is going to mean changing the way Agatha does things, and that's going to be tough at first. But not doing things this way in the situation you've described can get very expensive because it's legal and financial. Lawyers charge by the hour. Financial institutions make fees for transactions. All this means they bill you for whatever effort they have to put into communicating with you. Lawyers bill by the hour. All the time it takes to read and respond to whatever correspondence you or the other people involved send them. More words mean more money. That's why I'm advising this way. Use as few words as possible. The fact that more words mean more money and that clarity is of the essence, that's your cover for not engaging with the bully any more than you absolutely have to. But the actual benefit here is twofold. That's the explanation you can give that people will accept. But the actual benefit is you're limiting contact, which is what you wanted to do in the first place, right? You got the power. You're doing what you want. The change is not being as much as the bully would probably like. The other benefit to using as few words as possible is you're giving the bully less ammunition to use against you. So real simple. You have 3 options every time you have to deal with this person. Yes, no, and I need clarification. Pick one of those. Pick one of those. Whatever you do, don't explain your position using any more than a single sentence. The more words you use, the more things you're giving them to pick on. One wrong word and they'll likely use it against you. So yes, no, or I need clarification. That's the extent of your responses. Because the bully doesn't really give a damn what you want. Let's be real. They're a bully. They don't care about your reasons or your comfort or where you're coming from. Because they're a bully. So because they don't care, the goal here is for you to not care. Completely depersonalize the exchanges in your mind. Make the bully no different than a bank teller or someone you're ordering food from. You have to communicate with them to get the item that you want, but that's it. They're not an important relationship. So the minute they start acting up, you end the conversation. Not threaten to end the conversation. Say, I have to go, we'll pick this up later, and leave. Now, they'll likely make a big stink about this the first few times, but that doesn't matter because they're not important to you, right? if you were ordering food from somewhere and the person behind the counter started give you a hard time, and you're in a strip mall with like 4 different restaurants, 5 different restaurants, would you stay and take the grief, or would you just go somewhere else, right? It's not that important. You have other options. I gotta go. We'll pick this up later. The goal here is to keep the whole thing out of the playing field where the bully has the upper hand. And that's usually drawn out high conflict situations where the bully can turn the focus onto what you did instead of what they did. Sound familiar? Past conversations where every time you try to point out the bully's bad behavior, they counter with something you did, possibly months or years ago. They leverage the fact that third parties are conflict averse, and those third parties will pull a, well, both sides made mistakes, creating a false moral equivalency between the bully's ongoing bad behavior and the one thing you did 6 years ago. Sound familiar? Probably sounds familiar to a lot of people listening because this stuff's widespread. Now, the total suck thing about these scenarios is human nature. That one thing you did 6 years ago tends to hold more weight in dysfunctional social circles, especially families, than the things the bully does on an ongoing basis. Now, why is that? It sounds completely counterintuitive. The bully has trained people's expectations of them. They've trained people to expect bad behavior from them. You've likely heard something like this. Oh, that's just who they are. That's just their personality. They can't help it. You've probably heard that more than once, right? Now, because of this, because the bully has their brand that they're being consistent every time they grief you, and you have a more positive brand that you violate if you get into it with the bully and play their game, every word you say is potential ammunition for them in this regard. And that's why I tell you to limit the number of words you use. And when we come back from this break, I'm going to give you examples of how this would apply in real life with real life circumstances. Stay tuned. It's not therapy. I'm Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, but I'm going to help you with this, Agatha. And everybody else, stay tuned. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner. I am not a therapist. And before the break, I was advising a person named Agatha on how to deal with financial and legal conversations with a bullying relative. And I promised to give an example of how responding with as few words as possible would work. So here we go. Say you need a sign off from them as part of the legal proceedings to go through, right? What most people do is try to be nice. They try to use soft language, right? They try to appeal to, hey, we're all friends here. That's a losing game with a bully, right? They don't care. They don't care about you. They're not your friend. They're a bully. So the person will say something like this. Hey, the lawyer needs these documents. I know it's a hassle, but can you get them to me when you get a minute? Right? That seems really nice. And with a functioning person, that would be fine. You're empathizing, right? Not so with a bully. Because with a bully, that opens up the conversation to just how much of a hassle it is, why it's your fault, why you're incompetent. You've always been incompetent back to when you were 6 years old. Families are so fun that way, right? Yeah. We don't want to give them this opening. Instead, make the request with a firm deadline to give them less wiggle room. Now, this is generally a good strategy for asking for stuff, even though when you first start doing it, it feels harsh, it feels blunt, it feels pushy. Something like, hey, the lawyer needs items A, B, and C. Can you get them to me by next Friday? Do you see how clear, succinct, and direct that is? Now, with a bully, a real bully, you might still get pushback and complaining. And that's when you refocus, still using as few words as possible. If their complaints seem like they're leaning towards yes, they're just complaining and guilting, say, so yes, you can get them to me by Friday. That's great. Here's where to send them. Cut it off. Or if they are actually obstructing, okay, so next Friday's no good. What about the Friday after? You see how that narrows the corridor that the drama can fill? Now, really impossible bullies, they're going to try to hijack no matter what you say. So if you get an eye full in messages or an ear full in a voicemail, wait at least a full day before responding. What that does is it slows down the momentum of the conversation, gives you some ability to calm down so you respond from a place of power, and gives them less ability to control the momentum and hijack the logic of the scenario. And yes, you may not believe me, but all these things are within your power. Lawyers can make things sound scary. Real estate agents can be even worse. Any representative should be giving you enough time to make decisions logically. So if you're constantly coming up against financial and legal things, they're saying, we need this now, we need this today. They shouldn't be doing that. You should have at least 24, if not 48 hours to sign things. It should never be that rush. Any representative that is charging you or making a commission off your business should be giving you enough time to make decisions calmly and logically. Now, if you need to know your rights in a given area, call the professional organization that licenses the financial or legal professional. That's why these organizations exist, to make sure that people they authorize aren't pulling, I'll say, shenanigans. Now, people might criticize you for doing these things. They might say you're being high maintenance, you're being too picky, whatever, because you're less easy to push around. That can be hard. That can hurt. But think about it this way. The whole problem is that you're getting criticized in your family no matter what you do. You're getting bullied no matter what you do. That's why you avoided contact with this person for as long as you did, because they're toxic. They're a bully. So you can either be criticized and pushed around, or you can be criticized and stand firm. No criticism isn't an option. So take that out of your decision making. Because these are inherently difficult, unpleasant situations that spring out of dysfunctional family dynamics. And what that means is you got to be compassionate with yourself. Top 10 phrase, self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion, right? This is why. You probably are going to cave on some things. You're going to get worn out on others. That's okay. It is absolutely not the end of the world. It is not catastrophic. So they screw you out of grandma's dining room table set, or it's just stuff. Be compassionate with yourself. One way or another, you'll eventually be rid of this difficult family member again. Just get through it. Family members of this sort need the perception of control. So no amount of control is ever enough. This may seem hard to believe since they seem so frequently out of control. That's why they're scary. But it may help to recognize that at the core of their bad behavior is the inability to handle uncertainty, change, or the inherent unpredictability of dealing with other people. Okay, Agatha, hope that helped. Email me again if you want additional information. 289-275-9600. That's 289-275-9600. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Or the contact form on nottherapyshow.com, Not Therapy Show, or Twitter and Instagram. Now, the meat of the show. The family bully Agatha is dealing with is what many professionals refer to as having low emotional intelligence, or EQ. It's a term that's been around since the 1990s, predominantly in business leadership circles, and I've got an expert on that subject Joining us after the break, Phil Johnson, founder of the Master of Business Leadership program right here in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Stay tuned for that after this break on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner. I'm not a therapist. And you know what time it is? It's time for the first It's Not Therapy interview of 2023. I've got a great one for you guys today. I've got Phil Johnson, founder of the Master of Business Leadership program. He's in Mississauga, Saga 960 listeners. Phil is here to talk to us about emotional intelligence, the theme of this episode. Now, Phil, what's your definition of emotional intelligence? Because I've seen a bunch of different ones, so I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, thanks, Liana. It's great to be on your show. An easy way to think of emotional intelligence is it's the ability to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation triggers in us and move through it towards what we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that fear to keep us stuck in our comfort zones.
Now, there's a big focus on IQ, right? Intellectual intelligence. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence, and how do they overlap and interplay?
Great question. Thanks for asking. Emotional intelligence is an experiential process, whereas our ability to do intellectual labor is genetic. If you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you inherited those genes. But whereas not everybody can have 160 IQ, everybody can develop their emotional intelligence, and the ROI is far superior than intellectual intelligence. As a matter of fact, there was a 40-year study done at UC Berkeley comparing IQ with EQ, and they determined that emotional intelligence was 400% more valuable in determining success than intellectual intelligence. And I actually think the number is much higher than that. But even if we go with their number, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It is more useful in the long run, and business is starting to pick up on that. But I'm going to take a swing here. You can tell me if I'm wrong. In my experiences working with some pretty big businesses, they keep trying to cheat. They use the right words. They use the right terminologies. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Yeah. They keep trying to filter emotional intelligence through intelligence. What's wrong? You're nodding. What's wrong with that approach?
Liana, that's a fantastic comment, and it really leads us into our discussion. Mm-hmm. Our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us because they focus primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor, and they've done little or nothing to develop our emotional intelligence. And we're facing a tsunami of change with a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change. Some scientists estimate that in this century, we could experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change. So change is increasing at an exponential rate. And our brain doesn't like change. Doesn't matter whether the change is positive or negative. We have significant both biological and sociological resistance to change. And the development of our emotional intelligence is the key to being able for us to navigate our way through it. And I can go into more detail on that if you like. But let me give you an example of a company that's currently valued at about $2 trillion. And they're doing $600 billion a year in revenue. And their primary hiring focus is emotional intelligence. That company is Apple. Mm-hmm. That's why when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, offer a solution to your pain. Whether you buy anything or not is secondary to their desire to want to serve you. They want you to have a great experience, and maybe you'll tell your friends and they'll tell their friends. And if you think about it, that energy you feel in that environment is a very different energy from the energy in the store surrounding that Apple store. And so, with the accelerating rate of global change, more and more organizations are in the process of hiring, developing, and promoting emotional intelligence. Think of IQ as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days.
Hmm.
So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. Think of emotional intelligence as a penny that doubles in value. So day one, you've got a penny. Day two,
Hmm.
you've got two pennies. Day 31, you've got $10.7 million.
Hmm.
Day 40, you've got over 5 billion. Day 50, you've got over 5 trillion. So the development of our emotional intelligence has an amazing impact on our results in our business, in our career, in our personal life. And if you want, I can talk a little bit about the three primary sources of resistance we have to change. Is that
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in that because last week we did change, and that's why I thought this week would be so perfect on this program. I want to take a point before you get into that. That slow start is precisely why it's difficult to persuade people that emotional intelligence is worthwhile. So much quarter to quarter short-term thinking. It's very difficult to get people to slow down to go fast. So is that part of the resistance to change you're talking about?
um, let me approach it from a different perspective.
Okay.
We're only actually conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time, we're relying on our unconscious habits to drive the bulk of our behavior and our results. And I'll come back to that because the central thesis of my work over the last 22 years is proving that there's an underlying energy physics to all of this that guarantees career, corporate, and personal success. But let me get back to the three primary sources of resistance to change. Here we go. The first one is there's a part of our old lizard brain called the amygdala
Mm-hmm.
that's been trying to keep us safe and alive for the last 500 million years by making sure we never leave the comfort of our cave.
Yep.
If we do, it automatically secretes a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol,
Mm-hmm.
and that causes the executive center of our brain to shut off, and we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. When that happens in conflict situations, people die. When it
Mm-hmm.
happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So, as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always triggers in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results. The second biological source of resistance is our existing habits. Once we develop a habit, it's there forever. It's a neural network pathway in our brain. And although we can develop new habits at any age, it's called brain plasticity or
Mm-hmm.
neurogenesis. Those new habits are always going to be weaker than the old habits because our old habits have an insulation layer around them called myelin, and it's thicker when we're younger than when we're older. So even though the new habits can work better than the old habits, they're always going to be weaker than the old habits and much more easier to slide back into the old habits. So there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be an ongoing internal battle constantly between the old habits and the new habits for
Mm-hmm.
dominance.
Mm-hmm.
The third source of resistance to change is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares the hell out of them. And the
Mm-hmm.
best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail, so they can say, "Look, I told you so. Now get your head down and come back into the herd with the rest of us."
Yep.
So even though the development of our emotional intelligence guarantees career, corporate, and personal success, if you don't have an emotional connection to the vision of a desired result that's greater than your fear,
Mm-hmm.
you will not be willing to do the emotional labor that the development of our emotional intelligence requires. And frankly, most people aren't. They know the words, they
Mm-hmm.
understand the concepts, but they're not willing to do the work of moving through their fear and anxiety, the change and innovation that the development of emotional intelligence requires. That's why the current level of employee engagement, according to Gallup, is around 13%.
Yep.
And it's also why over 80% of all M&A and organizational development initiatives fail.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to change yourself, the only alternative you have is try and change everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've been doing for a very, very long time. We've been using position-based power as a substitute to control and manipulate others, which creates the toxic work environments we see
Mm-hmm.
everywhere and low levels of employee engagement. Low levels of employee engagement are costing the U.S. economy over $1 trillion a year
Mm-hmm.
alone. So it's the development of our emotional intelligence isn't a solution to the tsunami of change we face. It is the only
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah. Especially post-COVID, where people, the scare tactics have left people completely lousy at effectively assessing risk. It's a good time to talk about this stuff because I think some people go into a different mindset when it comes to work. Personally, those old habits are comforting. Like you said, that desire to just stay in the cave where it's safe is very, very, very strong. Do you think, this is anecdotal on my part, maybe you've got the science to back it up. I have found that a big problem with facing fear is people can't admit they're afraid in the first place. They don't know how to feel fear, so they can't move through it.
Yeah, when we're in the midst of what's referred to as an amygdala hijack,
Mm-hmm.
we're not conscious, period.
Mm-hmm.
We're our eyes are open. We're simply in reaction mode.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going on in us and around us. And it causes us to often say and do things we later regret.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we're because of the accelerating rate of global change and the fact that we have this 500 million year old brain, all of us are in various stages of amygdala hijack. We're
Mm-hmm.
kind of like at the point of going off with the slightest trigger,
Mm-hmm.
raising our walls
Yep.
and going into fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Yep.
And that trend is going to continue as the rate of change continues to accelerate throughout
Mm-hmm.
this century. See, there's only two sources of motivation that will cause people to be willing to change. One is pain.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is passion.
Right.
And hardly anybody's connected with their passion. So for the most part, those individuals that are willing to do the emotional labor that the development of their emotional intelligence requires are usually driven by pain and urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting.
Now, what do you do? Because part of the thing that inspired me to start this show and the work that I do was being an emotionally intelligent person surrounded by an entire corporate structure of people who were emotionally stunted. And so I was treated like the problem because I was the anomaly.
Mhm.
And I wanted to provide this stuff because unfortunately, like you said, the bad habits kick in. And so the good habits feel like too much work and people keep sliding. There'll be this initiative. And because people are motivated by pain, not passion, no matter, somebody comes in and they've got all these reforms and it's great for 2 months and then it starts to slide. How does somebody start improving their environment? Because if the environment sucks, no matter how emotionally intelligent the individual is, you get that social contagion, right? It's like a hijack by proxy.
What you're asking leads to a discussion of the root cause problem and the root cause solution to all drama, chaos, and conflict all over the world.
Okay, that sounds like a perfect teaser to hold us over our final commercial break. When we come back, our final segment, more with Phil Johnson on emotional intelligence and your energy. Be back in a bit on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy, the final segment of It's Not Therapy for this week. I am still in the interview. I'm still talking to Phil Johnson, founder of the Master of Business Leadership program right here in Mississauga. And before the break, Phil promised to give us the root problem and the root solution to all the chaos, drama, and conflict all around the world. Phil, what's the answer?
It's energy physics.
Okay.
And I'm going to explain it to your listeners in about 3 minutes. When we're born, we're not born with a conscious mind. We are born with an unconscious mind, but our conscious mind doesn't kick in until we're about a year or so old. But we immediately start wiring up our brain, creating the neural network pathways that become our habits in order to survive, get food, fit in, all those kinds of things. And a lot of those habits unconsciously cause us to give away our energy. And we do it in a myriad of ways, in how we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. But here's the problem. When we're giving away our energy, it creates an energy deficit in us. So at the same time we're giving away our energy, we have to be replacing that energy by trying to steal the energy of other people. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all over the world, all the time, unconsciously. So what I do in the Master of Business Leadership program is I show people how they're unconsciously giving away their energy. And I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And when they stop giving away their energy, their need to steal the energy of other people goes away because they don't need it. And the results of that process are you become a more inspirational leader, you develop your emotional intelligence, you become more conscious of what's going on in you and around you, you become freer from your ego-based fear, which leads to higher levels of trust and engagement, which guarantees career, corporate, and personal success. I've helped organizations generate over $1.5 billion over the last 22 years all over the world. I've worked with executives and organizations all over the world, and it's no different anywhere. It's exactly the same challenge.
Yeah, and it's so widespread that I can hear proverbially people already rejecting the message. They start finding reasons not to make the change because they're afraid. And they can't acknowledge that they're afraid. And so they start going, yeah, but this person, this person, this person. One of the top 10 phrases I have on this program is people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. And I highlight that distinction for a reason, because when you start, even in leadership, the first thing you get is resistance when you start making changes, right? And you have to do the time-consuming, labor-intensive process of getting buy-in from the people you're managing. And that involves pushback.
Here's the thing.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Here's an important thing to consider involving inspirational leadership. Because we've evolved from herds over millions of years, we've had to develop the ability to sense whether somebody's trying to help us or eat us. So we've developed these specialized brain cells in our prefrontal cortex that brain scientists call mirror neurons. I call them bullshit meters.
Okay. And some people's are inverted. Yeah.
So that's why when you walk into a room, you can sense the energy of the room, or you're having a conversation with somebody, you can sense whether they're trying to help you or hurt you.
Yeah.
So that as you learn to lower your walls, as you learn to stop giving away your energy, people will automatically get a sense that they can be more of who they are around you than they can be around their victim buddies. And that's what creates inspirational leadership. That's what creates followers. So here's the thing. When we're giving away our energy, we have to be around other people that are giving away their energy.
That's right.
So victims, what I call victims, travel in packs.
Yep.
They have a codependent relationship, but they don't like each other, they don't
No.
trust each other, and they can never lower their walls around each other, but they need each other. But as you
Yep.
develop your emotional intelligence, you start to separate yourself from the pack. You learn to stop giving away your energy,
Yep.
and that creates inspirational followers.
That was a huge thing I had to learn the hard way through my experiences in trauma therapy. That social element that some people gotta go because that
Yeah.
circle of, as you call them, victims, keeps the people who don't, who don't live in that sort of parasitic reality. It stops them from connecting with you because they see them go, those people are bad.
Yeah.
I don't want to be around them. And the bad people are keeping the good people away.
Yeah.
And I know those are moral terms, but I'm just trying to break it down
Yeah,
for people.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
There is a method. Organizational change cannot occur before individual change. And so there's a methodology for individual change, and there's a separate methodology for organizational change. But as you train, as you develop more people, as you show people how to stop giving away their energy, you're actually draining the negativity, the drama, chaos, and conflict out of the organization that the victims need to feed off of. So if you think of an organization as a big pool of energy,
Mm-hmm.
the more emotionally intelligent individuals you can bring into that organization, you're draining the negativity, you're draining the toxicity out of the environment, and you're forcing people to change or leave the environment for a more you're forcing what I call the wolves
Mm-hmm.
to leave the environment and find a more chaotic environment, that where they can feed off of people. So an organization can heal itself, but it has to do with the development of emotionally intelligent individuals. Once there's about 20% of the organization that have
Mm-hmm.
learned to stop giving away their energy, the organization reaches a tipping point
Yep.
where it starts to take on that behavior throughout the organization, and the organization heals.
Because ultimately it's easier for people when there's an alternative to everybody going for each other's throats.
Well, yeah, but that's exactly the point.
Mm-hmm.
When you're learning to stop giving away your energy, your need to control and manipulate others goes away.
Yep.
And that's the
Yep.
point.
Yeah, our whole idea as a culture of what strength looks, sounds, and feels like is wrong. You're chuckling, yeah.
The you're starting to touch on the scope of the challenge.
Yes.
All of
Yep.
our educational, political, economic uh, institutions have a win-lose model baked into it.
Yep.
So we've been socialized from birth into a win-lose model. And quite frankly, we're at a tipping point as a species on the planet. Um, we have to make a dramatic change in our trajectory in order to deal with the tsunami of change we're facing. The battle that's really going on isn't an external battle,
Mm-hmm.
it's an internal battle.
Yep.
So um, if we think the battle is external, that's simply our ego-based fear coloring our perception. The real challenge is our internal resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
So as we develop our emotional intelligence, as we learn to stop giving away our energy, we become more connected not only with ourselves, but with everybody else.
Now, last thought here. We've been focusing mostly on management with this, and a bunch of people listening to this is, but I'm not management or I'm not upper management. What can I do if management, isn't with the program?
You can learn to stop giving away your energy. You can enroll in the MBL program. See, leadership's not a position. It's not a title. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a title to get people to follow you, you're not a leader.
Yeah.
Every single one of us, whether we're folding boxes in the warehouse or signing checks in the Oval Office, we need to become truly inspirational leaders.
Now, how do people get in touch with you, Phil, so they can check out your program?
They can reach out to me through my LinkedIn profile,
LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with you?
or my catalog or my calendar. Yeah.
Calendar. All right. Phil Johnson, founder and inspirational leader of the Master of Business Leadership program located in Mississauga for Saugoning 60 listeners. Phil, is there anything we didn't cover that you think people should know here?
I would encourage everybody to bet on themselves by developing their emotional intelligence. It is a guarantee to success, as difficult as it is, and it is extremely difficult. It's a solution to a problem that's not going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And as we progress throughout this century, as the rate of change continues to accelerate, an above average level of emotional intelligence is going to become fundamental to your career, corporate, and personal success.
Yeah. Start now, guys. Phil, thanks so much for being on the program.
Liana, thank you. I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. We appreciate you. So that's our show on emotional intelligence and making changes. Bit of a different format this week by necessity. New Year, some new experiments. Hey, change is good, right? Change is good. Theme of the last few weeks. If you have a question inspired by what you have heard tonight, you can give me a call, 289-275-9600. That's 289-275-9600. Or my preferred method of contact, email Liana at nottherapyshow.com. That's Lian as in Nancy A at nottherapyshow.com. Or if that's too much to remember, you can fill out the contact form on nottherapyshow.com. Or go to Twitter and Instagram at Not Therapy Show. There's some additional content on Instagram for those of you who want quick bite videos that are more casual, less structured. And that's it for this week. And next week, I still don't know. It's the new year, and so guest booking is still working the bugs out. But it'll be great. It'll be based on your feedback, as always. So thanks very much for joining me with the new time for the next couple of months, the new day and time. This will be this way next week as well. And remember, if you ever miss an episode or you don't want to miss any episodes, you can check out the podcast version of this program, It's Not Therapy with Liana Kersner, anywhere you get your podcasts, because life happens. It's crazy, but you know what I'm going to say? Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Bye for now.